And we are live. This is JWC Livestream. Once more, JWC Livestream. This is Sublimated Poesy with David and Ricky, where we talk creativity, but we're talking about poetry and all the advances and treasures that poetry brings to a creative obsessor's life. As you can see, I'm Ricky O. And David Anderson is here. David, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Very good, very good. That's good. That's good to know. We have a very nice poem for you, and hopefully we will have a door and key wisdom type situation out of it all. But first and foremost, David, how have you been, and how is your creative life going lately?
Getting a lot of work done on my novel Athenaeum that I'm writing with you. And I'm writing some new poems, and I've finished a new essay last week. And it's been a process of, I would say, I feel like I'm crossing over some threshold with my focus in my creativity thematically, and I'm also experimenting with meditation as a tool to sort of put out fires that are unhelpful in the creative process, where my mind can focus in a much sharper and direct way. So any anxieties that might be burning in my imagination simply fall out of the way, and I'm able to connect immediately to putting the words down onto the page, which for me has always been a particular problem. Sort of suffering through concentration problems now and then, running thoughts. So I'm writing, and then suddenly a thought occurs to me. I was going to go and buy a bag of oranges today, and I forgot to buy the bag of oranges. And then I'll think about the oranges for the rest of the time that I'm writing a poem about frogs or something absurd like that. So um, I highly recommend all writers consider incorporating meditation into their daily life.
Couldn't hurt. Down to stress relief or centering yourself, getting yourself processing stress. And what you said also with regards to it's an old principle we have here at JWC. You do your adaptive work before your creative work. And what does that mean? It means those oranges were something that your adaptive side needed. You needed vitamin C. So it was haunting you. And obviously oranges are tasty and enjoyable just for themselves. But that whole while you were unfulfilled, unsatisfied. So the adaptive side was not met. And then the creative side, there was disruption. No, I mean, that happens. Sometimes you can't get the adaptive stuff done because of some, inclement weather or some strange condition. Maybe you're feeling unwell, and then it just backs up the whole muse cycle, Yeah, my sympathy's there, but it sounds like you're taking arms against it and using meditation to help countermand that. Do you find that it's effective?
I find it very effective. I found a series of breathing exercises that quiet my mind so I can focus and concentrate on the page that I'm reading and the page that I'm writing. And you would be amazed at how a few simple breathing exercises can calm the mind and focus it and center it. So it's not just a matter of doing something that may seem new agey to you or a waste of time. There is a process of centering the imagination within this field of focus in your mind. and often if you've had a very hectic day and you have concerns, you will bring those concerns to the desk, and they will be detrimental to your creative process. So the purpose of the meditation is to um, empty the mind of those, and it's very easy to do with a few breathing exercises and concentrated meditation. Find a comfortable place to sit, a room that's quiet. Um, Focus your breathing and empty your mind beforehand for a while. And I think you'll be surprised that there's no better drug than meditation for centering the mind.
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly to engage the creative process, it's like what Carl Jung said, there has to be a meditation space. This is regarding his collective unconsciousness and its archetypology and the shadow work and all that. But to be a creative, especially a creative obsessor, you end up inhabiting a similar environment where there's a solitary, like a sequestering. I mean, many, many hours alone. That's what writing is. Many, many hours alone. You eventually can write in public. You can eventually go out in public almost as if the muse wants you to be seen writing in public. And I have done that, but to me, it's better to be solitary and in a mindset where you're exploring the verges of unconsciousness, like lowering your heart rate. I mean, it's like you're saying about meditation. It could be as useful as a cup of coffee or a glass of whiskey or some other delicacy
I
that
can't
brings
speak.
calm.
Yeah, I can't speak for the benefits of whiskey personally. Coffee is an excellent stimulant. Um, there's a wonderful scene in the movie Excalibur where Arthur's talking to Merlin about enemies, outside and within, and Merlin makes a uh, point of making it clear to Arthur that his greatest enemies will be within his own mind, and I think that's very true. We face that sort of problem every day. If you get yourself to a room and you can't write, it's because the enemy that's keeping you from writing is not your loud neighbors or your employer who is unforgiving and ungrateful, or any number of other excuses. You have to clear your head from all of those echoes that sort of bounce around in your head that have been gathering throughout the day. You have to find some way of doing it. Meditation is one way. You could go for a long walk. And when I say meditation, I mean meditation can take any form. Say beforehand you start writing, you're washing up from dishes left from lunch. You can meditate on the washing of those dishes, and that will serve as well as a breathing exercise for clearing the mind. The point of meditation is to put yourself in the present moment. People tend to live in the future or in the past, but the present seems to be this space that we need to have this need to fill for some reason. So my point is, you are here sitting right now, Ricky, listening to me speak, and you have thoughts going through your head, and you're paying attention to what I'm saying. So you are in the present. You're like right now actively participating in this moment. That's what every writer should be able to do, is in the moment that they're writing, participate in that active moment, that moment that they're writing, as opposed to, well, I'm going to write 2,000 words today, but I have to think about picking up the children from soccer practice, or I have to remember to take my car in, or I need to go and buy my wife flowers because It's just one of those days that maybe it would cheer her up or something. So there's always something from the past or the future that is kind of converging in our mind. So the purpose of meditation is to empty all of those thoughts from your head so you can focus on what it is you're writing.
Focus. Attention and focus. That is the key. That's something worth musing, and maybe even will be inspired and get a muse flash from it. Very, very sagely wisdom being distributed. Well, I'm gonna be getting back to Anthonam. I have a few more chapters to write, that book that I'm writing with David. And I have some sea shanties that I'm gonna experiment with.
Which I'm looking forward to immensely.
Yeah, not something I'm used to, but I'll give it a whirl and see. I've written many poems and I've written songs before. I can't say for certain that the spirit of music is with me as much as
It's much harder than I realized when I wrote one for the book early on in the process. I wrote a scene between Annabelle and Christopher's singing at the on the deck on and the bridge, and writing the verses is one would assume if they can write a poem or a book length fantasy, they can easily write a song. That's just not how it works, unfortunately.
no.
Everything is a challenge, and I have a lot of respect for songwriters. So,
As do I.
yeah.
We'll see. We'll give it a whirl. It's an experiment. Lyrics and poems have a sort of common vibration, so who knows, you know. The other thing we're working on is Exsanguinator. Only have 8,000 more words of that out of a 40,000 word novella. Had a little bit of issues restructuring the outline a couple days ago, but it worked out, and it's actually, the way it's settled, it's better. It's better than what was there. So as much as I'm a plotter, it's never set in stone. Sometimes the outline there's usually around the middle of the book, there's a reconstruction that goes on. And this was a little later than that. Probably the 3/4 mark around there, but it's been a blast to write. A real crazy book.
Tell tell the listeners about the book a little bit, the story idea.
Yeah. Well, conceptually speaking, the what if is, what if Vlad Tapis, Vlad the Impaler from Romania, what if a big alien ship crashed into his region and hopelessly befouled his culture with monstrosities and terrors, and it was already in that cauldron of religiosity and zealous hysteria and cultural upheaval.
And invading Turks and
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And the Orthodox mind versus the Catholic mind. So all that stuff is crazy. And so there's this character, Wolfslav Halgrim. He's what they call a night walker. He goes to the holy bogs and he lays in the holy bogs, and then this being, this alien, programs this cluster of blood drinking octopi to envelop his body in a symbiotic coat. It's like armor, and it acts as a secondary musculature, which makes any night walker so equipped way stronger than a human. And there's also these freshwater horseshoe crabs that kind of like enmesh themselves in the octopi, the weavings of the octopi. And the whole thing is called a vrumzu. And this Vromzu symbiote allows a character like Volslav to fight these undead horrors and alien monsters from another world, you know, and other things besides. So it's been a real joyride laying down that stuff, you know, pacing it out. It's a quick. You read Babbletron, David, so it's a very very similar pace as pacing as far as the action, with some expo here, world building here, but action, action, action as a narrative driver, you know. So we'll see how it turns out, but it's been fun to write, you know.
It sounds like an
um,
excellent story.
yeah, it gets pretty crazy. Um, so that's our creative unpacking, and I think we're doing good, you know. Um, Constant word budget for me, it's like 2,000 words almost every day. So I'm psyched. This project's soon to come to a close, and then I have some other collaborative stuff to get back to. Um, Today's poet is Mary Oliver. I'm not as familiar with her as I should be. That's part of what's going on with us too. Is we're really trying to like for my part, I'm trying to get exposed to more poets as part of my coming back to poetry, you know. And Dave, I mean, I've introduced some of my own, but David has a wonderful list. This is one of those. I know, David, I know you esteem this poem greatly. This is a poem again by Mary Oliver. It's called Hummingbirds. All right. Um, the female and two chicks, each no bigger than my thumb, scattered, shimmering in their pale green dresses. Then they rose, tiny fireworks, into the leaves and hovered. Then they sat down, each one with dainty charcoal feet, each one on a slender branch, and looked at me. I had meant no harm. I had simply climbed the tree for something to do on a summer day, not knowing they were there, ready to burst the ledges of their mossy nest and to fly for the first time in their sea green helmets with brisk metallic tails, each told wing with every dollop of flight drawing a perfect wheel across the air. Then with a series of jerks, they paused in front of me and dark-eyed stared as though I were a flower. And then, like three tosses of silvery water, they were gone. Alone, in the crown of the tree, I went to China, I went to Prague. I died and was born in the spring. I found you and loved you again. Later, the darkness fell and the solid moon, like a white pond, rose. But I wasn't in any hurry. Likely, I visited all the shimmering, heart-stabbing questions without answers before I climbed down. And I suppose it was published in a book called White Pine in 1994. That was Hummingbirds, and you were right. You were right, David. And this is the key behind the wisdom. I'm feeling it already. The concept of focus, you know. The female and two chicks, each no bigger than my thumb, scattered and shimmering in their pale green dresses. So it's as if we're looking at some transcendent form, passing into formlessness, tiny in its scale, almost like a fairy. Mary was quite taken by this. And it was in her focus. She became unfocused. She was looking for something to do. So she climbed up this tree, and it seems to me it was a happenstance. She came upon a nest of hummingbirds, which I must say that must have been quite a thing, an unforgettable and undeniable thing. They rose tiny fireworks into the leaves and hovered, and then sat down, each one with a dainty charcoal feet, each one on a slender branch. Then she assesses herself before them, since she's being regarded. You know, the awareness is there. So the focus reclarifies. Now the surprise turns into a realization, you know. She hadn't tried to disturb them. So it was innocent. It's as innocent as anything can get in this gray purgatory world. Because she didn't know they were there. Edges and fly for the first time, and she gives them sea green helmets, which is the feathers or whatever it is, the down on their heads. Brisk metallic tails, told wings, every dollop of flight drawing a perfect wheel. So we're talking about the way the wings are flittering. I mean, it's just an amazing situation. A series of jerks, they paused in front of me and dark-eyed stared as though I were a flower. And then they were gone. And she's up in the tree, contemplating. I mean, we're dealing with something so beautiful here. She must have been in that tree lots of times. Maybe these are subsequent memories of her being in that tree. No, I mean, it's likely it wasn't the first time she climbed a tree. Tree climbers are like that. They have favorite trees. I remember one from my boyhood. Not that I did a lot of tree climbing. So I mean, we're dealing with an amazing bit of focus and observation here. Mary Oliver's quite the talent. It's so wonderful to be introduced to this. David, what did you think of this, and what do you think of this poem now that you've heard it? But I know it's one of your favorites. I'd love to know.
Oh, White Pine is my favorite Mary Oliver book, actually. And I used to own a copy of it, but it was stolen from me. Not many people steal books of poetry, but this one was stolen from me. It's a remarkable poem. It works on a very tiny scale in a way that I would say generally fiction can't work in the same effect. The imagery is extremely vivid, and it's also very approachable. Everyone can understand this poem. There are maybe one or two words in here and how they're used that are slightly mysterious, but they work within the general framework of the poem. It's also sort of a looking out at the world and then looking in. So we go from she was bored and she's walking down a country road perhaps, and it's a hot day, so she decides to climb up a tree to get out of the sunlight, and discovers this bird's nest. And it's obviously a mother and two chicks. And they're such tiny, tiny little birds, as small as you can get, and so delicate. So immediately she is forced to work on a tiny scale. If you look at the lines here, in their pale green dresses, then they rose, tiny fireworks into the leaves, and hovered. Then they sat down, each one with dainty charcoal feet, each one on a slender branch. Notice dainty charcoal feet and slender branch. That gives you a direct idea of scale. And then she expands in further on in the poem with a description of the coloring of their plumage. And she uses very creative language. For example, their sea green helmets, not an expected line in any sense of the word, very colorful and brilliant, with brisk metallic tails, tails that could almost seem as if they cut through the air like a knife would, each tulled wing. Now, if you look up the word tull, it's not, I can't find it in the dictionary. It's actually a variation of tull, which describes a stiffened form of silk. So it's a sort of an invented word to describe the wings as having a kind of stiffness to them. So that's very creative, and that's something that I always suggest to my students, that if you can't find the word, just make one up. That's the nice thing about language. If the word doesn't exist, invent it. So that's a little trick that you can do. I also recommend people have a thesaurus at their side at all times, so they can look for that new way of expressing an old idea.
Yes, yes. Another good handy trick is to have a book of archaic phraseology.
Yes.
I have one on my shelf over there on the other side of the studio here. And it's very, very good for picking out old words that have fallen into disuse. It's nice to spice stuff up, wordsmithing, cribbing, digging for old stuff. I'm sure you'd agree, David,
Yes, I would. Then the entire poem shifts. It becomes extremely personal. It's no longer about the birds, nor is it about climbing a tree. It's biographical. It's about her place in the world. I went to China, I went to Prague, are not necessarily literal. They can just mean I lived in the world. They can also mean that. And I would have to check, although I don't know if she ever visited China or Prague. But I would say that they're just simply, it's just simply metaphoric language being used there. I died and was born in the spring. So we have a moment of reincarnation there. I found you and loved you again. So you have a destined love. And later in the darkness fell in a solid moon like a white pond rose. But I wasn't in any hurry. Likely, I visited all the shimmering, heart-stabbing questions without answers before I climbed down. You don't get answers in poetry. You get moments of expression. It's not the job of the poet to define things. It's the job of the poet to use language in a creative way to set a mood. And in this setting, it's all about her communion with nature. She is part of nature. She's been given this very holy moment where she gets to witness something that most people will never see in their life. This is a marvelous poem. For me, it works on every level. How does it work for you?
Yeah, well, it's a very, very stark display of talent and observation, as you say, focus, and then going through the daydream. And I do believe there's a strong lesson there as far as out of focus, or unfocused, and then focus of observation. She was bored, and then she climbed that tree, and then then she happened upon those baby hummingbirds in the nest, and all that opportunity and potentiality all coiled up there, and she was wise enough to know, and wise enough to see it, and gentle enough to not interfere with it, and almost worried that she had, and then we drag from there, from those hummingbirds, and then we see her get introspective and sort of wandering around. So it's unfocus, focus, unfocus, phasing in and out, you know. um and it's beautiful. You have so many questions, there's so much mystery. I find that poetry is best when there's enigma and a certain mysteriousness clouding it, you know. There's moments of clarity where she describes in wonderful language the beauty of the creature and the tininess of its scale and how precious it all is in its life cycle. That's vivid, you know, standing out. But then there's the mystery of the latter lines, you know. um so I find that to be wonderful. What do you think about mystery and poetry, David? Are you a fan of that sort of thing?
A mystery in poetry is fine. I don't, however, recommend direct abstraction just for effect. For example, even the tree functions as a metaphor. Alone in the crown of the tree, I went to China, I went to Prague. This isn't simply abstraction. She has claimed the tree as a nest for herself to consider and reflect on her life. So it has a very solid and direct purpose. It's just not merely abstraction. So it's really important that we always cement our imagination and reality in some way, that we give it a context that can be relatable. And the best way to do that is to use plain and simple language.
Mm.
So we use things like tree and mossy ledge and tulled wings. And we consider the scale of them. And then she's weighing her scale against the tiny, delicate scale of these wonderful creatures. And she's permitted for a time to reflect on her condition in the world. And then perhaps one of the most beautiful images in the poem is the second to last stanza, where we have that solid moon like a white pond rising up. So there's a third party in this poem finally, in the presence of the moon. So she can commune with the moon now and not just the birds. Um, the wonderful thing about this poem is that it packs so much in such a tiny little framework that it works perfectly thematically with the concept of a hummingbird itself. Like if you look at the scale of the imagery and the metaphor and the enjambments and the brevity of the stanzas, this is a perfectly crafted poem. If you took away one word or one line, the structure would possibly fail. So it's a perfectly crafted poem.
Yes, yes, it is delicious and nourishing to the muse because of its luster and its mystery, all the different variations of focus. Um, Very enjoyable. I think I'll be cruising for White Pine sooner or later, huh? You have that book? Oh no, you said it was stolen.
It was stolen, yes.
Oh,
Yeah, it was. I was sharing an apartment with someone, and when they packed up, they decided that they wanted to keep that. So
mm,
I guess either as a memory of me or to confound me. I'm uh,
combination.
betting on the latter rather than the former.
Well, hopefully they're
Because it was a
using.
very dear copy to me. I had written in it many times and left many notes in it
Mm,
for each poem. So um, it it's amazing how attached we can get to a book, and uh, it's almost like losing a family member or a pet, even in some circumstances. We value them as treasures. So,
Well, there is this tremendous amount of psychic gravity and power, spiritual power behind a book. To me, that's why I collect so many of them and I write them, because you're dealing with a hyperdimensional hologram here. That's what language communicates to the third eye, to the reader's imagination, and that comes out of the writer's imagination through the muse and inspiration and whatnot, and then you communicate. So you could say it's a material object, but it's to me it's a hyper state. It's a hyper object.
mm,
Um,
carry all of
meant
the memories of reading the book. And it's very personal too.
yes,
That
yeah.
that book functioned in a way that was part of my life. How many
Mm,
times have you pored over your copy of Dune and reread it, for example?
many times, I
Right,
assure
or
you.
your copy of The Two Towers, or I
Hmm.
mean, they have a special place in our hearts, books.
Yeah.
So it did sting a little bit when that book was stolen from me, and it seems like a very inoffensive crime, but I was quite angry about it at the time. I remember calling her up and saying, "You have my books and I want them back." She didn't return the call.
Well, yeah.
So
It may
I was
have been.
like, no, okay. So I can get another copy of it. It's still in print. So, but it had
Well,
my notes in it. So it was a little personal.
yeah, yeah. It's hard. Knowing you as I do, it's hard to think that that person wasn't trying to be at least a little malicious, because I'm sure you loved books then almost as much as you love them now. So, and especially poetry. I mean, um, not that was not nice. Whoever did that was not
With
nice.
some people, the only way to know them is through their selfish acts. Even if they're wearing a friendly mask, we come to know them through their greediness or their little
Mm,
slights and crimes against us.
mm. Or their wonderful gifts and treasures that they throw at our feet, such as Mary Jane Oliver, the poet. We're going to try to find out a little bit more about her. She was born on September 10th, 1935. She passed away January 17th, 2019. She's an American poet who won the National Book Award and the Pulitzer Prize. Her work is inspired by nature rather than the human world, stemming from her lifelong passion for solitary walks in the wild. It is characterized by a sincere wonderment of the impact of natural imagery conveyed in unadorned language. In 2007, she was declared to be the country's best-selling poet. Um, she was born in Maple Heights, Ohio, a suburb of Cleveland. Her father was a social studies teacher and athletics coach. As a child, she spent a great deal of time outside, where she enjoyed going on walks, as has been said, or reading. So sitting with a book somewhere in some beautiful place. This is a child, an old soul for sure, perhaps with excellent parents. In an interview with the Christian Science Monitor, Oliver commented on growing up in Ohio, saying it was pastoral, it was nice, it was an extended family. I don't know why I felt such an affinity with the natural world, except that it was available to me. That's the first thing. It was right there. And for whatever reasons, I felt those first important connections, those first experiences being made with the natural world rather than with the social world. um, she says that her family was dysfunctional and that her childhood was sometimes very hard, but that helped get her into writing, which helped her create her own world. Um, She began writing poetry at the age of 14. She graduated from the local high school. She attended National Music Camp. At 17, she visited the home of the late Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Edna St. Vincent Millay in Austerlitz, New York, where she then formed a friendship with the late poet's sister, Norma. Norma spent the next 6 to 7 years at the estate organizing Edna St. Vincent Millay's papers, which must have been an incredible thing for her to be experienced in, almost like a baptism in words and the significance of
Great poet. Yes, American poet.
yeah,
So,
that is quite significant. She worked at that estate. Olivia's first collection of poems, No Voyage and Other Poems, was published in 1963. In the 80s, she taught at Case Western Reserve University. Her fifth collection of poetry, American Primitive, won Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1984. And she was a poet in residence at Bucknell University. She won several awards and went on to When Death Comes from New and Selected Poems, her collections Winter House, Prose, Poems, and Poems, Why I Wake Early and New and Selected Poems, Volume 2, among others. She also wrote essays, getting the Best American Poetry Award and Best American Essays for several years running. Her poetry, Mary Oliver's poetry, is grounded in memories of Ohio and her adopted home of New England. She was influenced by Whitman and Thoreau. She is known for her clear and poignant observances of the natural world. Her creativity was stirred by nature, and her poems are filled with imagery from her daily walks and all the experiences: shorebirds, water snakes, the phases of the moon, humpback whales, all sorts of amazing observations in nature. And she carried a notebook. This is the key, folks. We're going to get into this. The sketching of nature, the sketching of the natural world, how important it is. She carried a notebook. Her favorite poets were Whitman, Rumi, Emerson, Shelley, Keats, and others. She's been compared to Emily Dickinson. Her poetry combines dark introspection with joyous release. Said she was criticized for writing poetry that assumes a close relationship between women and nature. Why that's to be criticized, I have no idea. She wasn't daunted. She found that the self is only strengthened through an immersion with nature. She is a poet of wisdom and generosity whose vision allows us to look intimately at a world not of our own making. New York Times describes her as far and away this country's best-selling poet. That was attributed in 2007. So we really have something here, Mary Jane Oliver. We have someone who was always wandering through natural landscapes in a rural environment, and she was drinking it all in. What do you have to say about that, David? When was the first time you found yourself with a notebook out in nature or anywhere, in a mall, anywhere, just sketching what you were seeing and capturing it in the poetic sense on the page? When did that occur to you first?
I started using a notebook I would say probably in my junior year of college to just make brief notes, lines, words, impressions. And my practice is to jot them down and then come home and write a pencil draft and then finally a computer draft. Um,
Hmm.
she is also the author of two books that I highly recommend. One of them is called The Poetry Handbook, and the other is called The Rules for the Dance, which are both nonfiction books. And one of them is a general uh, reference text for poetry, and the other is specifically meant or intended for a metrical verse for people who write metrical verse. And I think all of our listeners, particularly those I'm sure they're out there, would benefit from both of those books. And they're very readable and accessible, and they're very friendly and approachable works on the subject of writing poetry. So I highly recommend those books. Um, she was she was one of these very honest and private souls, I think. And people have a bad habit of complicating her too much, I think, of reading where in things they don't need to read. And the charges of her being a woman poet too connected to nature almost seem irrelevant, if not misogynistic
Yeah,
in
I don't
some
even.
sense. I don't even understand what that charge would mean. I mean, perhaps a listener can explain that to us, but um, her poetry transcends everything because it's about the natural world. I mean, everything in the human sense. And she was an intensely private person. She never discussed her private life, and that is fine by me. All that in the end, all that really matters is the work for myself. Some people will say, "Well, David, you have to take in consideration what happened to her growing up, and the life that she was living." Some of this is true. However, in the end, all that matters is what's on the page and what it does for the reader. So I'm intensely grateful for everything that she wrote. And she's one of my go-to poets. If I'm feeling like I need some sort of balance or connection with life, I will turn to her for truth and simplicity over any of the modern poets today. And
Hmm.
I really like Mary Oliver. I really dig Mary Oliver. So she's a great poet.
Yeah, I can see why. Um, Circling back to the question that I put to you, um, when I mean, I was always um, sort of contained by my curiosity of nature, but I was very anxious and fearful as a child. I don't have the best memory, so I started as soon as I started actively trying to be a poet, which was, of course, the whole thing was brought on by my wanting to be a better storyteller, and ultimately to be sort of a humorist. But it was like natural observations became necessary to build vocabulary and to observe the hologram of stories as they unfolded, like birds flying up and down in a tree or being chased by a cat. So I started taking notebooks and going to parks or walking. I mean, there was a time about 15 years ago, I was always walking around with a notebook. And then while I was on the job and you couldn't have a notebook because, you're concentrating, and there's professional stress, I bought myself a conveniently sized digital recorder. So if some bit of poetry flashed into my head from the muse, I would just read it into the recorder. Or if I saw something that was a poem in and of itself, the way that Mary Oliver saw poetry in nature, then I would immediately speak it in there as a sketch. Because that's what you're trying to do, folks. You're trying to sketch. Capture that moment so that if you can't write the poem or the story of it, you can at least shorthand it and then allow your muse to decode it later when the time is right. There's something to be said of that sort of code in poetry, the focus of observation and consciousness, the shimmering of awareness on a summer day, or the snow blindness of a whiteout in a blizzard. All that stuff is a matter of observation and focus. And if you can sketch it down, certain things are unforgettable in your life. Certain things you can't even escape if you wanted to. But there's little precious nuggets and treasures of things with facets that it would be best to get them taken down, to have them written. And that's what Mary Oliver's trying to teach us here today. That's the wisdom, is write all that stuff down and look at her. I mean, David Anderson thinks she's great. She won all these awards, and that poem was brilliant, undeniably brilliant. So it's just an incredible circumstance to start writing poetry on your own and going into nature for inspiration, or to refine your art, or taking poems out of dreams. It's all about the focus, isn't it, David? Like, where is your focus, right?
I would agree. It's a relationship, as she has a relationship to those hummingbirds. The poet should have a relationship to their craft and the subject of their poem. It should be that intense, and should be that delicate and refined too. Voice will lead you to the path that you need to take to develop your craft.
Yeah.
So the first thing you want is your voice. You want to seek your voice, and that will lead you to where you need to go. And if you steer true to that, you should be fine. It's just a lot of small steps. Being a poet is a daily practice and of awareness of the environment around you. A poem can come from innocuous objects, like I'm sitting at my desk and I'm looking at an orange fountain pen. There could be a poem in that. I'm not seeing the poem right now, but there could be a poem in that fountain pen, in talking about that fountain pen. But my point is to illustrate that poetry is everywhere in the environment around us. And it's just a matter of opening up and being aware of it.
Yes. Work at it, get to it, go out, write a poem, look out of your window. If you can't go somewhere, look out of your window and write what you see, clearly, mysteriously, with the intent of beautification and making people marvel. It's not always so easy, but you start with little steps. Once you take down things in nature, the rest should unfold. That's the key, man, and if you're having fun doing it, it's better still. If you love it, it's better still. It'll only enhance your life.
Yes, it should always be a passion, not a chore.
Yes. If you're not having fun, then find something else. Go paint or draw or play a fiddle, or I don't know. Whatever it is, seek to create. Be creative. And follow your bliss. Whenever you follow your bliss, time flies. And that's how it is when we make this show. Sublimated Posy with David and Ricky. The time flies. Before you know it, the whole hour is said and done. So this has been JWC Livestream. And we've just went over a beautiful poem and talked about poetic focus and how important it is. That's the key behind JWC, folks. We can't make you a better writer, but we can help you to become a different writer. And the more differences you have, the closer you'll get to poetic voice fulfillment, which David was alluding to earlier when he was talking about voice. If you follow the voice, you're going to get some really great results in your writing. Head over, please, to joeswritersclub.com. Check out our author pages and blogs. Head over to joeswriters.club and sign up for our forums. Head over to our social media, JWC, that's Joe's Writers Club, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and most importantly, go to YouTube where we stream. JWC, Joe's Writers Club. Like and subscribe our YouTube channel. Share it with your friends. Anyone who's a poet in training or a creative writer, people have dreams of writing books. We've written books. We have dreams. That's one of the reasons we're here. We're here to share our creative obsession, our passion for writing, and to help people along in any way we can. It's a very, very important thing to me to know that anyone who's touched by creativity can have as much resources as they can to help them along. Drop comments if you have any questions or you'd like to talk about anything. And I want to thank David Anderson, the poet, for co-hosting this with me and furnishing our topics. I myself have been brought out of poetic oblivion by these ministerings, and I'm very, very glad of it, throwing down poetry here and there. And I almost had forgotten it, but that would have been a shame. It would have been a shame to turn my back on the origins of why I do what I do. I used to think I was a poet. Now I think I know I'm a poet because it hasn't left me. She came back right away, the muse, the poetic muse. Thank you again, David. And thank you all for listening. And we'll see you again, hopefully very soon. Take care.